Hi everyone, welcome back to Grounded Haven. My name is Michelle and I live in Virginia with my husband Aaron on our small homestead. We have about 2 acres here where we try and grow a lot of our own vegetables in our garden. We also have some animals. We have 10 chickens right now that provide eggs for us, and we also just recently got 2 Nigerian dwarf goat kids, and we plan in the future to milk them. So today I'm going to give you a tour of our vegetable garden in July, and I'm also going to show you around and visit the animals as well. We're right in the middle of summer right now, so we have a lot going on in terms of vegetables. The summer garden is really flourishing now, and we're also already getting ready for the fall garden. So I'll be showing you what we have around, and I will start with the vegetable garden. Here's an overview look of the garden at the moment. I think from a distance it's looking pretty good, and we are getting some pops of color from like different flowers blooming around the garden, so that's really nice as well. So I'll start in this first bed on the left. And this is where I had some cucumber plants. I still have a couple of them. I grew 2 varieties this year. I grew Zloty Lan on this side of the bed, and then on this side of the bed I have Bait Alpha cucumbers. And of the 2 of those, the Bait Alpha has definitely done better for me this year, so I've left those plants in because they're still doing really well. And the Zloty Lan, I've already pulled out one of my plants. The other one I'm leaving for now, but I did go in and add some snap pea seeds along the base of this trellis here. So once those start coming up, I'm going to pull out this other cucumber plant because it's just not producing that well. These leaves over here look okay, but a lot of the Zloty Lan cucumbers that I've been growing this year have some sort of like disease issue, and they didn't have this last year when I grew them. It's just something that I'm dealing with this year. And here you can see some of the baby Bait Alpha cucumbers. I really like these. They stay kind of on the smaller side, maybe like 6 to 7 inches, and they're a little bit smoother on the outside. And then in front of the cucumbers, I have a couple of basil plants. These ones are holy basil, which I'm going to have to start harvesting pretty regularly now because they are getting to be a good size. I'm gonna dry these for tea, and then I also have Thai basil here. And Thai basil is delicious, but also is just really pretty. It has these nice spikes of purple flowers, and I do really like to put these in bouquets. The leaves and the flowers add really nice texture, and it also smells really nice. It's about to be really loud here for a minute because our rooster is doing this thing where when our hens start making their egg laying noise, he also starts making the noise. I don't know if he just thinks he's a hen or something, or if he's just trying to scare other animals away from the hens laying, but yeah, you can probably hear him. It is really bizarre. Our last rooster did not do this, but every time someone starts laying, he starts just screaming his head off. Let me know if any of your roosters do this. I haven't heard of this being a thing, so yeah, it's just a really interesting quirk that our rooster has. In the next bed, we have started transitioning some of this stuff out. So you can see some spaces in the middle that are a little emptier where we had just harvested some edamame, and I went in with some daikon radish seeds just to fill in the space and start getting our root vegetables planted for the fall. But I still have a lot of stuff that was planted in like the spring or summer. I have a couple of edamame plants that have not been harvested yet over there. I also have my shallots, and now you can get a pretty good look at them now that the edamame plants are not covering them. They're getting to be a pretty nice size this year. And then I also have a row of bean plants, which you can see are kind of getting eaten by bean beetles. But hopefully those will die out pretty soon before the actual beans come. I do sometimes have damage on my actual beans with the beetles eating them and leaving some little spots, but the beans have not started forming just yet, so I think these are provider bush beans that I planted here. In the next bed, I have a big jungle of tomatoes. I have 2 varieties, Celebrity and BHN 1021, which are both hybrid determinate tomatoes, and I really like these tomatoes for canning. They had been doing really well. They were putting off a lot of fruit, and some of them are a really nice size, and they are just starting to ripen up. I picked the first one from this patch the other day, and then there's another one ripening here, but I am having a little bit of a hornworm problem. There is one going around and eating not only the leaves, which you can see some of the damage here, but the actual fruit, and it's damaged a lot of my tomatoes. I picked a couple of these off the other day just to show you, but here's one where it took a couple of bites, but then this tomato like almost half of the tomato has just been eaten and now it's just unusable. And I've been trying to come out here to find the hornworm. I've tried during the day. Usually we can find them pretty easily during the day if we just follow like the trail of destruction and poop, but we haven't been able to find it yet. And we came out at night with a black light to see if we could find them and to see if they would glow, but that didn't work and we didn't find it. Yeah, I'm not sure if it just has already turned into a moth or like moved on, but I am a little annoyed because it did damage a lot of my tomatoes, and I ended up just picking some of them green if they had like one bite taken out of it, and I just fried them up as fried green tomatoes because as they start ripening, that like scab might start rotting and I don't want that. Here you can see more damage. It ate this whole leaf, and then I've got more tomatoes here with damage. So really not great because these are like my favorite tomatoes that I use for preserving, so kind of annoyed at that. But hopefully we can find the culprit soon. I have this massive bush here that's actually a mum plant that I planted in the fall, and I wasn't sure if it would winter over, but sure enough it has, and it's just like this beautiful round bush here, and I think it's going to be really pretty for the fall. So I'm glad that came back from last year. It's just like so thick. I didn't know mum plants got this big. One thing that I definitely wish was better this summer was how my arch trellises are looking. You can see that they're pretty bare, and I feel like normally there would be like a good amount of stuff growing on them. Usually I grow something like a winter melon on these arch trellises. None of mine germinated this year. I tried a couple times, so I've just given up on those, and that was my plan for this first trellis over here. But since my seeds didn't germinate, what I decided to do was I planted some climbing beans at the base here. These are Scarlet runner beans. This is a new bean for me. It is supposed to be really, really pretty, which I think will be great because I've just been really craving for something beautiful to grow on these arch trellises. But you can also eat the beans both as like fresh snap beans, or you can let them dry and eat them as shelling beans. So I'm pretty excited for that, and I only just planted these like a couple weeks ago and they're already pretty big. So hopefully by next month they'll be covering the trellis and they should have these like really beautiful red flowers. I also have a couple of volunteer yard-long beans from not even last year because we didn't plant any last year, but these are from 2 years ago that volunteered, and I just let them grow because I mean nothing else that I planted was growing on the trellis. So you can see these little baby beans on here now, and it's already reached the top of the trellis. There's not a ton of leaves, so you can't see it too well, but soon enough we'll have lots of yard-long beans from just a couple of plants. So I'm glad those plants volunteered themselves. In the last bed on this side, after we harvested a bunch of leeks over here, I planted some asters right along the edge here. I really like when I have flowers along like the borders of my beds, along the pathways, because then it looks really nice. You can see how I have a dahlia plant over here, so I thought it would be nice to match it with some flowers on the other side. And then other than that, I also have a sweet potato that I planted here. This is a Korean or Japanese sweet potato, the one that has white flesh on the inside. We really, really love to eat those. And I had bought one from the store that started sprouting, so I just like cut off the end that had a bunch of sprouts and stuck it in the ground, and it's doing really well. So I'm hoping that some of those will produce some sweet potatoes because I did plant that a little bit later, so hopefully it has time. And then in this empty space where we had leeks, I planted some beans. I think I planted edamame here, and you can see that they're just starting to come up. Here's a little baby bean here, and then there's another one popping out. Then we also have a watermelon plant right here. We historically have not been very good at growing watermelons, but this plant is looking pretty good. This one again was planted a little later in the season, so normally it would be bigger than this, but my watermelon plants just always die, so I'm happy that this one even looks as good as it does, and we'll see if it does anything. I still got my massive dill plants here, which are going to seed, so those will probably come out soon. And then my winter squash plant has finally started vining a lot over here. I think this is a butternut squash, and there's one growing down here. It's either butternut or Dutch crookneck. I can't really tell right now because the neck hasn't gotten too long, but there's one squash here, and then I see some other female flowers starting to form down the vine. So hopefully we will have more. And sometimes I also pick off the male blossoms and make fried squash blossoms as well. That's a nice little treat for the summer. And then on the very edge on this trellis, I had also popped in one of my leftover tomatoes when I was planting, and that's growing really well on this trellis. This is a purple Russian tomato. Now going down the other side of the garden, in this bed here, I have, again, a bunch of different things. This is kind of the time of year where all my garden spaces have so many different things, because anytime any amount of space opens up, I just go ahead and drop in some seeds or transplants. It doesn't matter how small the space is, because I want to make sure I get those plants in time to get multiple successions or get them in time for the fall. So first of all, you can see I have a little patch of beans here. These are the dragon tongue bush beans. I planted these at the same time as I planted the provider bush beans that I showed you over here. So those also have not started forming beans yet, but they're looking pretty good. These ones are faring a little bit better from the bean beetles, but you can see a little bit of damage here. And then I have my patch of dazzling blue kale, and I know I just mentioned in my other video that these kale plants were looking good, but I took a closer look. I don't know if just a bunch of caterpillar eggs hatched or something, but I did have a lot of plants that were infested with caterpillars. So I did pull off a bunch of these leaves. You can see that these plants, they just had so many caterpillars in them that I just pulled off a lot of the leaves and fed them to the chickens. They can eat the kale as well as the caterpillars. So hopefully that will help keep the population down a little bit. But honestly, at this point of the year, we have so many other things to eat that we typically are not really eating a lot of kale. It also doesn't taste as good in the summer. It's a little bit more strong flavored and bitter. But really my goal for this is just to keep it alive until the fall, where it can keep growing into the cool weather. Hopefully there will be fewer caterpillars, and then I don't have to start new seeds and wait for my plants to establish. These are already really nicely established plants. You can see that they've gotten really tall since I planted them in the spring, and there definitely still are some really nice looking leaves. But if it comes to the time where I need to start using it in the fall and I'm still having a lot of caterpillar damage, I'm just gonna spray this with some BT, and that should take care of the caterpillars. I'm just not bothering with it right now because, like I said, we're not eating a ton of kale right now. Going down the bed, I have a couple of tomato plants. These, again, were just some leftover plants that I had when I was planting, and I just stuck them in the middle of this bed with some tomato cages, but they're doing pretty well. And then I have another Thai basil plant here, looking really, actually this is a couple of plants, and they look really nice. They smell so good. I did also seed in some carrots along here because I had this little strip of space, and you can see some of them coming up. Well, I don't know if you can see it because they're really tiny, but I can see them. There's another one here. So hopefully I get more coming up. It's kind of hard to germinate carrots in the summer because it's so dry. It's hard to keep the soil moist, but hopefully we'll get a nice little patch of carrots here. I'm always surprised how many carrots you can grow in such a small space. This is just a 4-inch wide strip that's maybe 2 feet long, but you could grow a couple dozen carrots in this space. So any little spot you have, just throw some seeds in there and don't leave it bare. More random things here. I still have some cabbage in my garden, which I do really need to get out of here. This one, if we do another harvest video coming up soon, we're gonna harvest this one. I think this is supposed to be a core de bout cabbage, which is a teardrop shaped cabbage, but this one looks pretty round and it's actually really dense. I might have to check my seeds. I can't remember if I did a hybrid variety of green cabbage this year. I don't think so though. This one's just not really looking like core de bout, but it is looking very good. It is looking like it's ready to harvest. When you feel that there's not a lot of give and it feels like a really nice, hard, tight head, then that's a good time to harvest. I also have a ground cherry plant here. It had been looking really sad last month because it had just been getting eaten by potato bug larvae. There's a potato beetle right there. The potato beetles like to attack ground cherries because they're in the same nightshade family as potatoes. So even though this is technically a ground cherry and not a potato, the beetles were really eating that up. But the larva has all moved on, I guess, now. So now it's starting to form flowers, and we've got some baby ground cherries here as well. So once those drop to the ground, they'll be ready to harvest, so we still have a ways to go. And then I also popped in some more winter squash here. Looks like I have 3 plants in here, so I'll probably thin down to just 2. And this one's probably a butternut squash. There has been so much growth in my sweet potato bed from last month. I think last month I had just planted my slips in, and now the sweet potatoes have completely taken over this bed, which is awesome, just what I like to see. They've probably been loving all of this really hot weather we've had here. The leaves are looking really good. And last year I tried eating sweet potato leaves for the first time. I just put them in some soup and they were really good. You can also stir fry them, so that's a really nice way to use some of this plant. A lot of people had suggested to do that, and I think it's pretty popular in like Filipino food. So yeah, it was really fun to try that, and maybe I'll have to come out and do that pretty soon because these leaves are just looking so beautiful. In between my sweet potatoes, I had also planted in some eggplant starts that I got at a local nursery, and those are alive, but doesn't really look like they're doing too much, to be honest. Like, no flowers really yet, but the leaves are looking good. Well, actually, here's a bud of a flower just starting to form here, but they haven't really done too much. This one maybe is thinking of making some flowers as well. But at least they're staying alive. They do look pretty good because I've been covering this bed with frost fabric. You can see I have hoops here and frost fabric. I get a lot of questions about like how to make these hoops, and I have lots of different kinds in the garden. I like to use thick gauge wire that you can get around like the chain link fence area of the store. But I also have these hoops that are just made with rebar, and then I put some 1/2-inch drip tubing over it. So this is 1/2-inch rebar, 1/2-inch drip tubing. So you can do that and it makes a pretty sturdy hoop here. And then in my next bed, you can see this is ladder mesh that I think you can find around the concrete area. So there's lots of different materials you can use to make these hoops if you're trying to like cover up your plants, which I do a lot of in my garden to protect from lots of different bugs because we have a lot of bugs here in Virginia. So yeah, so far the eggplants have been faring pretty well against the flea beetles with this row cover. So before I move on, I'm gonna go ahead and cover this bed back up because they will take any opportunity to come infest my plants if they can. In the next bed, I have a couple of zucchini plants. This is a 3x6 bed, by the way, so I have 2 zucchini plants, and then in between and around the plants, I had also popped in some edamame plants here. I've been just really liking popping in edamame plants wherever there are like little bits of space. They're pretty quick growing, so by the time the zucchini gets really big, these should be like pretty much ready to harvest. And they're really productive for like a small amount of space, so that's definitely one of my favorite plants that I've started growing in the last couple of years. And I've been keeping these beds covered to keep the vine borers and squash bugs off of my zucchini plants. Once they start flowering, I'll take the covers off, but I think the row cover has also helped with the bean plants so that the bean beetles can't get to them. So that's an added bonus that everything from this bed is benefiting from. So this is how these 2 beds normally look. They're usually all covered up, and it's definitely not as pretty, but it keeps my plants protected, and it's my first line of defense against bugs and pests so that I don't have to spray as much in my garden. So that's the route we choose to take around here. Before I move down, here's a quick little look at the green stock with the petunias that I put in last month. They're not really like thriving the way I've seen in other people's green stocks, but they're at least surviving. They're providing a little bit of color, which is nice. This like bright pink color is really nice and striking. But one thing that is doing really well in my green stocks, at least, is my herbs. I have some sweet marjoram down here. This is summer savory, which has kind of started flowering, but I did harvest some of this, and I think I'm going to cut off these flowers and hopefully the plant puts off another flush. I've also got some parsley here that's doing really well. Some chamomile. This is actually a volunteer chamomile, I think. And then my thyme is also doing really well. This is thyme I started from seed this year, and it's just looking so good. I've been harvesting a lot from it, and it's just loving life in the green stock. So maybe I just have to stick to herbs for here because they're doing really well. Any other kinds of like plants I've tried to grow in here don't really do that well. But even if I just grow herbs in there, I think that's pretty sweet. On this arch trellis, I was planning on having it covered with Armenian cucumbers. Those are growing, but they haven't really grown as quickly as I thought they would. But I do have at least a tomato plant that's kind of climbing up there, and I did put some Scarlet runner beans on this trellis as well on this side. And then here's my Armenian cucumber. So it's growing. It's at least doing better than what I've tried to grow in the past. It's about maybe 3 feet tall now, and it's vining up. It's got lots of flowers, no cucumbers forming yet, but I did realize that the Armenian cucumber is botanically a melon, and melons grow a lot more slowly than cucumbers. So I should have realized that and realized that they would grow slower, but I didn't really think about it. So next time, I'm definitely going to keep that in mind, that they don't grow as quickly as I thought they would. I just last night harvested my other patch of leeks over here. So now I have an empty space that I can pop something in. I'm either gonna do some of my fall brassicas or maybe those like tomatoes that I cloned from suckers that I showed in my last video, or some carrots. Lots of decisions. I just pulled them out last night, so I haven't really thought about it too much yet. And by the way, of the 2 leek varieties that I grew this year, I grew King Richard over here and Giant Musselburgh over here. And I think the Giant Musselburgh did a little bit better. The King Richard made longer leeks that were like really nice and slender, but the Musselburgh made fatter leeks that were shorter. So I guess it depends on like your preference. Since my leeks don't get like super wide, I prefer for them to get a little bit on the fatter side. So I liked the Giant Musselburgh leeks that I grew in this bed. Then in the very corner of this bed, I have another winter squash, and I haven't seen anything form on that yet, but it started to vine out. So hopefully we'll get there soon. On our side bed here, for this first trellis, I had planted some Suyo long cucumbers. You can see there's one over here, and there's one doing even worse over here. This one I'm just gonna go ahead and pull out because it's not doing anything. This one I'll leave in for now, but you can see how it has just these diseased looking leaves. So since this was not looking so good, I did go in and I planted some climbing beans along the base of this trellis. They haven't come up yet, but once those come up, if this still looks not very good, I'm just gonna pull it out and let the climbing beans take over. My chamomile has finally started to bloom. So I've been trying to pick these for tea. And I also just have a couple random tomato plants here. This looks like it's a pink Bumblebee tomato plant, which has been doing really well this year. I think it's one of my favorite tomatoes for this year. It produces really well, and the tomatoes are just so pretty and they taste really good. You'll probably see more of these in the back. We've got so many beautiful flowers in this area that I absolutely love. And what's extra great about them is that I didn't plant any of these flowers this year. They either volunteered or came back as perennials. We have echinacea here. Then we have some hyssop, which you can also use as a tea plant. Back there, the little pops of color, you can see rudbeckia or black-eyed Susan. So these 3 things are perennials for us in zone 7A. And then I have all my volunteer sunflowers that are looking so beautiful. I love these like orangey ones. And then this really tall one up top is pretty funny because it's actually 2 sunflowers merged together. I don't know if you can see, but it's a pretty funny looking one. Then I have some volunteer hyssop and then coreopsis here. And I did some natural dyeing with this coreopsis last year, and it makes a really pretty like yellowy orange color. So it's really cool. On this other trellis, I had planned for my tomatillos to be here, but most of them died. I have this one surviving plant that is just looking absolutely terrible. Again, the potato beetle larvae have gotten to this and have eaten a lot of the leaves. I actually see one little tomatillo fruit down here, but I mean, look at the leaves, they're just gone. And since that wasn't doing too well, I went in with some rattlesnake pole beans here, which are starting to produce, which is really great because my bush beans this year have been kind of a fail. I've been just trying to keep resowing them to see how they do, but so far they haven't done too well. But these rattlesnake pole beans are really nice. They get so long and they're so pretty. They've got some purple streaking and they've really started to climb now, so hopefully we'll be getting some good production. These ones do produce quite a bit as well, so hopefully I'll have enough to branch and freeze. I have just been loving the blackberries this year. They're doing amazing. We've already picked so many blackberries off of mainly this one bush here. We do have a second one there, but this one has been producing like 80% of the blackberries. They're just so massive and juicy and sweet. And again, I'm sorry I don't know the variety name because we just got this at Lowe's and it was not marked. But they're just so delicious and so good, and it's so nice to have a fruit that we actually have had some success in growing, because fruit is a lot harder to grow than vegetables, at least for us. Okay, so now we're in the back area of the garden, and this side here I'm gonna go over really quickly because it is definitely a mess. And I mentioned last month in the garden tour, but I'm kind of letting this space go crazy for the rest of the summer. Whatever's planted in there, I'm still gonna harvest and pick from, but I'm not doing a lot to like try and maintain it because this space has gotten out of control, and we just want to redo the bed formation for next spring. So after the growing season, we're going to put our chickens in this space and have them dig up all the beds and all of the weeds, and we're going to redo the space in the spring. And also we had a lot of trouble with deer and pests in here. So yeah, it is what it is, but there's still stuff growing in here. And amazingly, a couple of weeks ago, I saw that my artichoke plant was actually forming an artichoke. And I had just planted this spring to replace my artichokes that died over the winter last year. So I didn't think that they were going to form any actual artichokes this year. I thought I was gonna have to wait till next year, but here we are. And I might have waited too long. This is probably too late to harvest to eat at this point. So I guess I'll just let it bloom. Artichoke flowers are supposed to be really cool and really pretty, and the bees are supposed to love them. So yeah, I guess I'll let that one just bloom because I didn't get to it in time. But I'm really happy to see that my plant produced an artichoke at least. In the next row, I have a line of okra. This is the heavy hitter okra, and it is starting to produce now. You can see some okra pods here. Okra also has beautiful hibiscus-like flowers that you can see here. So yeah, I've got to come out and harvest today. This is just the very beginning of our okra for the summer, and I picked a few the other day and did fried okra when I did the fried green tomatoes. So very southern, very good. And then on the other side of the bed, I have this little area here that is covered, and under here I have put in some cowpeas. They've grown really quickly. So I put these here for a few reasons. First of all, cowpeas make a really good cover crop. They are in the legume family, so they can help add nutrients back to your soil. They also grow quickly, so they should help to just like cover up the area so that weeds don't grow. But if these form the pods and dry out, then we will harvest them to actually eat as cowpeas, which I think are black-eyed peas. I don't know if they're quite the same thing, but pretty similar uses if not. So yeah, I just had a bunch of seeds to use as cover crops, so I just threw these in here just to cover up the space. I didn't want to plant anything that was going to be like super high maintenance because again, I'm not really maintaining this space, but cowpeas are pretty low maintenance. I can just like throw them in the ground and pick them all at the end of the season. So that's why I threw the seeds in there. And I've just been keeping this covered because we do have a couple of deer that have been coming around here and they do like to eat cowpeas. So I'm just protecting it from the deer. The next two rows are our main rows of tomatoes, which are doing pretty well, which you would never guess looking at this mess of a space. But we have just started harvesting a pretty good amount. I am like just getting to the point in the year where I come out to pick just a couple of tomatoes for lunch or for dinner, and then next thing you know, I have a whole basket full of tomatoes because there's just more than you think is ripe out here. So I have a lot of my indeterminate tomatoes along here. The trellising system is working out pretty nicely. The paracord that I used this year is working a lot better than like the natural twine that I used last year that ended up breaking. And just really quickly, I'll go over the varieties I have here and what I'm thinking of them so far. So this one here is Purple Russian. I really like this variety. It does crack, but it tastes good. It's kind of like a plum-shaped tomato. Here I have the pink Bumblebee, which I showed you earlier, and absolutely loving this tomato this year. Really, really good production. We've been eating the most of these out of everything. Here are some that are a little riper. But I actually really like this shape. I know it's like kind of in between different shapes, but I don't really like small cherry tomatoes. I find them really annoying to cut, so these larger ones are nicer. And then the next one is an Arkansas Traveler. I haven't eaten any of these tomatoes yet because none of them have ripened yet, but I will say I am really impressed with how nice the plants are looking. This is a beautiful cluster of tomatoes right here, and the plants are looking so healthy, like very little disease. So this is a new one that I've tried this year that I'm really impressed with, and especially compared to some of the other heirlooms that I grew this year, like the Paul Robeson, which RIP, they're gone because they died after producing like not even one tomato. Because like they had a few tomatoes, but they weren't even ripe, so they didn't taste good before the plant died. So those are gone. And then my Brandywine tomatoes, I'm like really not happy with these plants. This is a nice big tomato, but it is the only tomato that this plant is growing. And I did have a second plant that also only made one tomato. And after I pick this tomato, which is going to be soon because it does look like it's pretty much ripe. So after I pick that, I'm just going to pull this plant out because it looks terrible and there are no other tomatoes forming on it. So I'm definitely not growing Brandywine again. And then I have the Artisan Blush tomato here, which does not do that well, especially compared to the pink Bumblebee. They're very pretty. The flavor's good, but I think the flavor's kind of similar to the pink Bumblebee, but maybe a little bit milder. So I would rather just grow the pink Bumblebee for like this same kind of effect, if you know what I mean. Then on the other side, I have all of my Roma and paste type tomatoes. These are like 90% Roma. I also have like a hybrid plum tomato in here somewhere, but at this point I don't know which of these plants are the hybrid and which are the Roma. I'm just kind of assuming everything's Roma. I don't find Roma plants to be very robust. They don't get very tall, so they're really nice for like maybe if you have a smaller space or you just want to use a tomato cage, so they are nice for that. But you can see these plants look pretty terrible, but they do have a lot of fruit on them and they're all starting to ripen. So I've been picking them off kind of at this like 80 or 90% stage and letting them ripen the rest of the way inside. Because I feel like these tomatoes do fall off of the stems pretty easily, so I would rather just get to it a little bit sooner. But I do have a lot of plants here with a lot of tomatoes ripening, so soon we're going to be making like tomato sauce and canning, so I'm really excited for that. Got some nice clusters of tomatoes here. Here you can see lots of ripening tomatoes right there. So that's pretty much it for this space. I don't have too much going on in these last two rows. I did have beans here, but the deer ate them and then the beans kind of came back, but I also just have not really been picking because it's a little bit of a jungle in there. Pretty much the only thing I've been picking back here is my volunteer calendula, which has been doing really well. And then I do have some lemongrass back here as well. Since I'm back here and Iris can hear me, she's kind of yelling a little bit, so let's go visit her really quick. So there's Iris and Heath. Heath is eating some hay inside the shelter right now. And Iris is on the little platform that Aaron made for them. So these are our two little goats, and they are about 2.5 months old at this point. So they're still just little babies. And I do have to say, Iris is a very vocal child. She's always screaming for us when she sees that we're outside, and she just loves her pets and her attention. Heath is definitely quieter, so it's going to be interesting when Iris is all grown up and when she goes into heat and everything. She's going to be so loud. The neighbors are going to hate us, but she is just such a sweetie. She just loves her pets and her hugs and her kisses. Such a sweet girl. Look at how sweet she is. She loves to do this thing where she just like rests her head on like a leg or a hand or a shoulder. She's so cute. Oh, Heath is like, what's going on over there? He's coming over, looking for pets. Probably looking for treats actually, but we have been loving goat parent life. We are obsessed with them. We come visit them all the time. They have just been such a nice little addition to our lives. Look at Heath's beautiful blue eyes. And Iris has got her beautiful brown eyes and her freckly face. Alright, so last area of the garden. I am still really loving this row of peppers back here. On the whole, the peppers are doing really well, other than this little area here, which I've explained. I think it's planted too close to the comfrey. So I do have a few plants that are struggling, but I've been amending the soil, giving them garden tone and fish fertilizer. So I do think that they're doing a little bit better than they were last time. You can see they've like greened up a good amount, so that's really nice to see. The ones closest still are a little bit on the small side, but this second layer here is doing pretty well. And the peppers are not quite like the tomatoes in that I have like very clear favorites, because I kind of love all of the peppers and I think they're all doing pretty well. Again, with the exception of just this little area, but that's not because of the variety, it's just because of the location. So I'll just show you some of them. I showed a lot of them during our last harvest video as well, but one of the ones that I think is really fun are these Lesia peppers, because look at the shape of that. It just looks so funky. It's got such a wide top over here, and then it's so pointy at the bottom. And just look at how many peppers are on these corbaci plants. So many. We're gonna be harvesting those really soon. They're so long and skinny, really cool looking. And then, as usual, the Jaworski peppers have just been doing amazing for me. Great production, really good taste. And I'm also getting some really nice sized bell peppers this year as well. This is the California Wonder. Look at this big guy. And they've just been so delicious. Even as green bell peppers, which I know not everybody likes, but homegrown green bell peppers have so much flavor and they're so good. We have been eating green bell peppers like every day. They're delicious. My little patch of zinnias is getting so big and it's so bright and cheerful. The colors are kind of Christmassy. It's kind of funny how that turned out. I didn't know what varieties I planted in here when I transplanted them, and they just happened to be red and green. But the red ones are super striking. And then I've got my straw flowers back here. I've already picked a few of these stems, but now they're growing back with new flowers. And then back here was my patch of onions. Well, half of it still is. I still have my yellow onions here. I think mainly that's all I have here that's left. And those are almost ready to harvest. You can see that some of them have started to fall over, but the other ones are still looking pretty upright. So I'm waiting for a lot of the patch to fall over before I harvest everything. Actually, we still have a couple of red onions left in here that we can pick soon. And then we had picked a lot of our white onions as well as a lot of our red onions. So in this big space, I filled it in with bush beans. And once those come up, I'm gonna add some hoops and some kind of fabric to keep the deer off of it, so I don't have a repeat of the deer eating all of my bush beans. Then in the other row, I still have to come out and harvest these cabbage plants. They're not very big, but I'm gonna pull them out anyway. And then in some of these empty spaces, I've put some cucumber plants in here, just some of the like smaller varieties back here. And they're not gonna have a trellis, they're just gonna kind of vine and bush on the floor. And then for now, I still have a lot of zucchini plants. I actually just saw a bunch of squash bug nymphs though. You see all those little guys? I have to come destroy them. And I see more eggs over there too. These plants in the back are not very big. Not sure what the issue is, but I do have these two bigger plants over here that we've been harvesting a lot of zucchini from. I see more nymphs out today. I haven't really seen that many squash bugs or nymphs, but I guess I just had a bunch of eggs hatch. But that's okay, because I'm actually about to pull out these couple of bigger plants because they are starting to get pretty diseased. You can see them on the leaves here with this like spotting, and it's not that big of an issue if it just stays on the leaves, but it has actually started getting on the zucchini as well. I think this is powdery mildew. You can see how the zucchini does not look great anymore. So tonight I'm gonna come out and pull out these zucchini plants. And then we'll see what I plant here. Maybe I'll do my brassicas for the fall in this space. I had planted more successions of zucchini here, but I'm not sure if it's like too close to the existing zucchini plants where the bugs can just migrate over. So we'll see how they do, or if I just have to plant something else. And then I just have some leftover broccoli plants. I've been pulling a few out here and there just to feed to the chickens, because those at this point are not producing any more shoots, and the worms and other bugs are starting to get to them, so those will be gone soon enough. On the side of the shed, we do have a grapevine here that I'll show you really quickly because it does have some grapes forming on there that look really good. We did harvest some grapes last year, and I'm not sure what variety it is, but they do turn into like a purple grape with a thicker skin. So I don't know if you have any ideas on what it might be, let me know. But this was already here when we moved in. And sometimes this vine does get really eaten by Japanese beetles. You can see a few over here. But this year, the beetles have been preoccupied with other plants, so the grapevine has had a little bit more of a chance to grow. And we've got a good number of grapes here. So we'll see if the beetles stay off long enough for these to keep growing, and hopefully we'll get a harvest of grapes this year. All right, let's go say hi to the chickens. Let them out into their little grass run. So I mentioned in the last video that we were treating Pretty Girl for vent gleat, but I think she's looking really nice and pretty much healed up at this point. That's Pretty Girl over here. Her butt's looking nice and clean and fluffy, which is just what we like to see. We only want fluffy butts around here. Yeah, I wanted to come in here because I saw an egg on the floor. I think someone laid an egg on the floor this morning. Not really sure why, but I'm gonna go ahead and pick that up before it gets stepped on or eaten. Oh my goodness, there's another egg on the floor, but it's a fairy egg. What in the world? Don't eat that. We've gotten a few fairy eggs recently. I think in like the summer, after the chickens have been laying a lot of eggs for the spring, everything inside them gets a little like overloaded, so they start laying these like weird eggs. So this is like our third or fourth fairy egg so far. And yeah, something weird is happening, but it's usually just a fluke and it passes. So that's going to be it for July's garden and homestead tour. In addition to these homestead tours, we do harvest videos, preserving and cooking, as well as some other things here and there. So if you're interested in any of that, consider subscribing or check out some of our other videos. But I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.